Why do some Catholic priests speak Latin?
Because they can.
The little bit I know about this is, Latin became, as I talked about earlier, became the dominant language of the West. And it was already, Latin was already beginning to be used probably at the time of Jesus in the first century. But by the time you get to the 3rd, 4th century, and where the church and the state under Constantine have merged, now the political and governmental language of Latin is now being adopted widely by the church, and within a generation, Jerome, one of the great early church fathers in the 4th into the 5th century, translates the Bible into Latin, what we call the Vulgate translation, and that becomes the dominant translation in the Western church for years, centuries. And so I think the basic answer is, well, that happened to be what happened in the 4th, 5th century, and it became tradition. It became the traditional language of what we today call Roman Catholicism, and was right up until the early 60s, right? Mm-hmm. Until Vatican Council II. So, you probably grew up.
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm gonna. This is a shameless call for compassion on me. Imagine being ADHD and having to sit in Mass every morning. When I went to Catholic school, the bus would show up around 7 o'clock. We would have to then spend the first half hour, 45 minutes of every day in Mass. And the Mass is said in Latin. And I have to sit there and listen to it. You're supposed to be perfectly still, listening to this guy talking in not, E pluribus unum Sancta Maria, holy, it was a nightmare. It was absolutely terrible. It was terrible. I want to tell you, it was terrible. No wonder I got whacked around so much. But it shows their incredible respect for tradition, that it actually became sort of seen as the sacred language. So it was just the Mass part of the Mass that when he was doing the communion and stuff, that had to be said in Latin. They could give lessons in English, thank God, but not that I listened to those either, but it was kind of sacred. And the Vulgate, Luther was radical because he was the first one to take the Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Bible, and to say, you know what, the Bible needs to be read and present for the common person. Luther knew Greek very well. In fact, he had the entire New Testament memorized in the original Greek, and he knew that the Greek of the New Testament was a common language Greek. It was a street Greek. It's called Koine Greek. And so he said, to be faithful to the Bible means we don't have it in the sacred holy language. We put it in common language. So he translated it into the German. And it was the first one to do that. Wycliffe had started that earlier, and there's others who were calling for that. But his was the first one that got off the ground, which is why I believe that today, some people say, oh, I love the King James Version because it just sounds so much more religious and holy and special. But that's exactly why it's not a good translation, because they didn't use a special lofty language. It was a street language. So the version of the Bible that is most readable and sounds most like ordinary talk, that'd be, all other things being equal, the better translation.